Just a few months ago, the video game company Adhoc Studio was bracing for the worst. There was no incoming revenue, the founders were no longer taking paychecks, they had been operating 7 years without releasing a single product, facing cancellations and losing business partners along the way. Then on October 22nd, they released the first 2 episodes of Dispatch, a narrative superhero game, possibly their last ever one. But life is filled with irony in every detail. There's a beautiful symmetry in how the story of Dispatch mirrors that of Adhoc Studio and the people within it. Dispatch is about a hero who doesn't know if he will ever get to be a hero again, made by a team who thought this would be their only game before shutting down, with a symphonic song from an artist who wasn't sure she'd ever make music again. Then, 2 weeks later, the game proved them all wrong. This is the story of Adhoc Studios and Dispatch. That was an emotional admission and predicament from the co-founder, Nick Herman. But if you look at the past 7 years of Adhoc Studio, it wouldn't actually come as a surprise. It's been a twisty, turbulent journey for the studio, which was founded by 4 video game developers who had all worked together at Telltale Games, the company behind graphic adventure titles like Guardians of the Galaxy and The Walking Dead. After shipping the fan-favorite Tales from the Borderlands series, Herman and 2 of his colleagues, Dennis Leonard and Pierre Choret, decided they were ready for something new. They had engaged in a lot of battles with the higher-ups at Telltale Games, and had burned up 10 years of capital to get those games out of the door. It was an internal struggle to ship that game and to ship it the way we wanted it to be. In early 2017, they left Telltale to take jobs at the San Francisco office of a little French gaming giant known as Ubisoft. Their job? Tapping to work on a new secret project, a new entry in the highly acclaimed Splinter Cell franchise. In Herman's interview with Bloomberg, he expressed how excited he was to be part of this and help revitalize it, because the series had been dormant for a while, and they thought this was a chance to tell a great story and do something the fans would love. But this wasn't the time nor climate for an old-school single-player stealth action adventure. The rise of Destiny 2 had caused a cataclysmic ripple across the industry and ushered in new games-as-a-service model, games that can be monetized for months or years after they released. An uprising that affected studios and games like Rocksteady and Suicide Squad killed the Justice League. One of the companies set in stone for a new cash cow formula was Ubisoft. The publisher began pressuring all of his projects to follow that route. We tried, let's make a narrative games as a service one. We were trying to make that make sense, and a lot of cool prototypes were made. But nothing stuck. Over time, it became clear that Ubisoft had lost interest in their Splinter Cell franchise as the studio began talking about chasing Call of Duty. The project evolved several times and would eventually morph into X-Defiant, an ill-fated shooter that was shut down a year after it came out. More projects had birthed along the way, with the likes of Hyperscape made to challenge Fortnite's Battle Royale scene, which all failed. The disheartening effect of this cancellation was the defeat of the very purpose Herman and his team left Telltale Games. Before the studio shut down in 2018, Telltale had been overtaking numerous IP licenses simultaneously and exposed themselves to double-digit working hours per day and crunches. The heavy pressure from executives was pushing them to meet unfeasible deadlines. Ubisoft was supposed to be a new start, a fresh take on a passion project. It was exciting to go to work for the first 6 months because we thought we were going to be able to do something really great. And then you realize that all of the things you care about, they don't anymore. It's a common thing in games. As Herman and his colleagues wondered what they should do next, they heard from an old pal from Telltale, Michael Chong, who had been talking to a company, Echo, that made interactive videos. An interactive video or film is a video game where you get to make choices which affect the story, just like Telltale games. The only difference is, it's live action. Games like Erica are fits in these categories. Soon the team was flying to New York for meetings in Echo's office. Eventually they agreed to develop a Telltale-style live action game. They all quit to start Adhoc Studio in 2018. They spent 2 years working on that project, a live action version of what would become Dispatch, and were about to start production in March 2022. Then a pandemic came along and shut it all down. Fortunately, they had a fallback option, a gig with their old company, Telltale Games, to make a title called The Wolf Among Us 2. The Telltale brand was seeing a revival after a shutdown by another company. They spent months writing an 800-page script, building prototypes and shooting cutscenes. But they ran into some disagreements with Telltale and found themselves frustrated as they worked for hire staff where they would never get the final say. We saw a future where we were gonna be there for a long time if we tried to stick it out, and we didn't want to do that, so we had to make a tough decision. After pulling out of The Wolf Among Us 2, the Adhoc team spent a few months working on yet another brand new game idea before they crashed out. The problem with restarting 4 times over is you get burned out in the process. You create all these cool prototypes and ideas, but they never see the light. And there's only so much time you can say, we gotta do it again before you're dried up. So the team decided to take advantage of something that was already made and build on it. And here comes the old binned project called Dispatch. This time, they figured they'd turn it into an animated game instead of a live action project. They shopped it around looking for funding and eventually landed a publisher, who stuck with them for a year or so before bailing out. It's one thing to have a cool idea, but another thing to sell it, especially for a nobody studio. Pitches for Adhoc's new game weren't met positively. The accepted wisdom was that games like Dispatch, those centered on narrative, just wouldn't sell, and the entire industry was retreating during a post-pandemic lull, with studios shutting down and laying off tens of thousands of people. Although money is scarce, no one wants to take any risk, or the riskiest thing you could possibly imagine investing in is a studio with no track record. They did have one secret weapon though. Their casting director, Linda Lamontagne, or however you want to pronounce it, had worked on shows like Invincible, Family Guy, and BoJack Horseman, which is an animated series that featured Aaron Paul voicing the Amanda slacker Todd Chavez. So she put Adhoc in touch with Paul, who loved the script and had always wanted to star in a video game. And they also nabbed Jeffrey Wright, star of Westworld and American Fiction. This was a tough year. Most of my career has only been focused on creative, staying up late every night thinking about how I can make the game better. Now you're spending all that time thinking, I know X weeks until the studio is out of money. It's a thing you don't wish on anyone. Desperate for funding to finish the game, Adhoc put together a snazzy trailer to show at the Game Awards in December 2024. That was introduced by Paul himself and voice actor Laura Bailey. The trailer wowed audiences, but behind the scenes, Herman and his team were scrambling. I was running around at the Game Awards talking with potential people who were going to try and bail us out. By this point, Adhoc was around 30 people who all needed to get paid. The founders didn't take paychecks for about 6 months. With money dwindling and very few options left, they came close to signing what Herman described as a bad deal, one that probably would have just ended up meaning we closed our studio. Then came a miracle. Critical Role, the company co-founded by Bailey, best known for his popular Dungeons & Dragons videos, wanted to sign a deal with Adhoc and, well, fund the final stretch of Dispatch. You spent 7 years working on a project, not because of the money, nor prestige, sacrificing opportunities like Splinter Cell and The Wolf Among Us, and definitely not due to the lack of interest, but due to the spirit of truth. Making something creative and from the heart, and despite everything. It feels like the end for your studio after all the hurdles, just a last hurrah. Even the inclusion of the song Radio was more of a small tribute before the last beat ended, before the curtains closed. But luckily, that's not how the story ends. October 22 is an ode to the past 7 years of the journey of the studio. The game's tremendous success not only ensured the survival of Adhoc, but it opened up doors for a new sequel and a whole lot of unexpected security for the future. It proved some of the doubters wrong, helping justify all the sacrifices made along the way. A lot of times, big studios focus on data, matrices, and establish franchises that guarantee sales, but they all end up being stale and boring. They don't touch the hearts of people, and they certainly don't create once-in-a-generation experiences. The thing that creatives should know is we didn't have any studio notes. We just made the stuff we all thought was good, and we funded it, and we're seeing the freaking money ourselves now. There's beauty in synchronicity, and sometimes, perhaps, in being wrong. See, Dispatch is a game about a hero who thought he'd never wear the hero's armor again, made by a team who thought this would be their final game, with a song from an artist who thought she'd written her last ever line. They all went into it thinking it was the end. But 2 weeks later, the world proved them all wrong.